Welcome to the Wash Forward Show. I'm Blake.
And I'm Tyler. We're a dynamic duo ready to take you on a ride through the world of car wash innovation.
Yep, we're diving into the world of suds, tech, and everything in between. Who knew clean could be this exciting?
Today's episode, we've got a special one. We've got two absolute legends with us, Chris Walker and Jan Van Kessel. I hope I didn't butcher that name, Jan, from the National Carwash Solutions. These guys are leading the charge and transforming car washing with smart controllers, robotics, and all sorts of tech magic.
Think of it as car washing, but from the future. So sit back, buckle up, and get ready for an inside look of where clean is headed.
And hey, if you're watching on Zoom, guess what? This show is interactive. You can raise your hand. Uh, we will get you to connect live. For everyone on Facebook, LinkedIn, or YouTube, drop the questions in the chat. Your thoughts are coming straight to us.
All right, so without further ado, let's bring on the stars of the show, Chris Walker and Jan Van Kessel. Chris, we're pumped to have you. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thanks for having us. Really excited to be here today. So I'm a degreed engineer. I went to Arizona State University, studied mechanical and electronics engineering. I was actually born and raised in Iowa, which is where the NCS headquarters are. But I escaped for a while to Arizona and then Kansas. Kind of worked my way through a few different industries, which somehow end up kind of relating to car washing in the end. So for a long time, I was in oil and gas with industrial equipment and oil refineries. Spent some time in an experiential design firm where we added kind of unique technology to commercial spaces and stadiums and museums. And then at a previous life, I was a programmer building websites and just different interactive online systems. So again, kind of all of that kind of comes together with what we're doing over here at NCS and our product development group. So I've been with NCS for 5 years now, leading the engineering team for most of that time in my role here. I oversee product engineering for most of our products. Pretty much the exception would be the vacuum systems. Our core wash systems would be the primary area. And yeah, we're really just working on here to advance all the technology and have this vision of Car Wash 4.0 that we kind of want to talk about with you.
Got it,
Excellent.
man.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Mr. Van Kessel, you're up next. Give us a little bit about yourself.
Good morning, Tyler. Yeah, my name is Jan van Kessel. I was born in the Netherlands, in Holland. And as a 14-year-old, I already got in touch with car wash. My uncle had a self-serve car wash. And at that time, was a lot of people that really didn't want to get wet. So I would go there on Saturdays and Sundays. And then I would get like a guilder, which is like $1. They would give me to wash their cars. So I would get wet and they didn't. So as a 14-year-old, you could make like, 35, $40 on a day. So that was really good money. So I figured, oh, that's an interesting industry. My uncle had a garage, so he was mechanically really good. So all the stuff he fixed himself. So you witnessed that, and then you started to figure out how all that fits together. At the times, there was no computers involved. These were just like little timers. You throw in a coin, you know what I mean? And the thing starts running for a couple of minutes. And then later, those things got smarter that you could count the coins. You could put in three coins at the same time. But where it got interesting for me is when he had problems with his vacuum cleaners. Like those timers had a tendency of burning out and failing. And I knew a little bit about electronics, not that much, but enough to figure out that I could see what's black, what's burnt. So I could fix that. And next thing is, I had a little company going making the vacuum clean timers because this guy that made those had problems all across Holland. So I quit my department store job, like filling racks, and this was much more profitable. So fast forward, I went to university in Eindhoven. That's kind of where Philips was born. So it was a very innovative university. We have always the latest development equipment. And it was just at the time when microcontrollers came onto the market. So the period I was born and I went through it just followed exactly the birth of that industrial engineering, microelectronics. So I started making more complicated control systems, and then as part of my master's, I came as an exchange student to McGill University in Canada. Met my ex-wife. I thought it was a good idea to, at that time at least, to move, and that's how I ended up in Canada. Once I was in Canada, I realized, Quebec doesn't have self-serve equipment, but I had kind of a love for the industry. So I took the yellow pages and started looking for car wash, and I found a Sherman distributor. And I went to see him, and he says, I'm doing, nothing with self-serve, but we do kind of in-bay automatics and tunnels. And that's how I got exposed to the tunnel. Long story short, started developing some tunnel controllers, started a business in Canada. 2000, I sold that to Dover. The company name was Kessel, hence my last name. And then I stayed on there for another 12 years. Basically grew that company that we had like more than 85% of the market share in Canada of the tunnels. The Canadian market is really driven by petroleum. So then, after 12 years, I had a friend at Mondo Products. He was in the chemistry, and he had a problem because he got all these people coming in with cost per car things. And he says, listen, I got all these car washes all across Canada. I'm not in the back room. My competition is in the back room. They're making the chemical adjustments. How can I impossibly manage that without, because he also had 85% market share. So then it was like there was the birth of AccuPump. So I developed that product. And next came NCS 3 years ago, and they bought the whole Mondo out. So that's how I ended up all of a sudden at NCS with all that technology. So I had promised him to stay on for a year, but as I met Chris and the team there, then I thought, oh my God, these guys, we'll talk about it later, doing all kind of really interesting things. And I kind of, I couldn't be at a better place in my life right now. So that's kind of a little bit my history.
What a phenomenal story. I learned a few new things there, and it's exciting to be on the call with you guys today. So, you guys both have, very important roles. One is in engineering and the other is in innovation. So how do you two work together at NCS in your day-to-day roles?
Yeah, we have a lot of collaboration. There's a lot of back and forth on what we can do with technology, what technologies we already have, how do we improve those, where do we have other opportunities in our product lines. Jan's experience is clearly vast and brings all sorts of unique ideas to the table. So we'll think of how do we improve a system, and he'll bring lots of solutions he's developed already right to the table. But then we have a really talented team in engineering and just overall our product development, larger ecosphere, just lots of creative people with lots of solutions, and really challenge themselves to see what we can do to innovate. So, but it's a lot of close collaboration. Obviously ends up being lots of meetings, but kind of the nature of the world these days, right? But so we have a kind of a flow too, where you have a mechanical product that then gets electrified, that gets automation, that gets connectivity, that gets connected to an app, right? That's kind of the flow of things these days. It's not just a mechanical equipment tied to some controller, right? There's a lot more nuance, and you're thinking about the data points and all the information you can pull. And again, like Jan mentioned, the Mondo products, the Accu devices that he has, lets us leverage that data right away. We can integrate these things very quickly into our product line and bring them online. So it's a really great way to be a fast-paced innovator.
Excellent.
Yeah,
So, Jan, from your perspective, what does it look like on your role working with Chris?
Well, Chris is very much into the day-to-day, and that frees up quite a bit of time for me to think more about like the future path where things should be going. And I always compared this industry since I enrolled into it, because I've seen what's happening in Europe and I can see what's happening here. Like in North America, I call it an island industry. And what I mean with that is that all these disciplines have their own. So you have people that make tunnels, and they're typically very mechanically driven. Control systems feedbacks are based on gravity and things like that. And then you have the filtration people. So those are separate companies that make the filtration and the ozone. And then you see the point of sale people. That's a different group again. So you see all these different disciplines in there doing their own thing. And then as an end user, you start to integrate what you think is best of class, even within the tunnel equipment that you select. And the problem with that is that you don't leverage each other's technological advances. And what I mean with that is when Chris designs a piece of equipment, typically if you're purely a mechanical engineer, which Chris is not, but if you wear that, then you have a certain mindset on how you're going to design that stuff. But if you are a control specialist at the same time, then you can start taking leverage of, and we'll talk about it later about smart drives. You can get a lot of information out of that. You can make these things smarter and more efficient. So my example is if you work with DMAS for chemical dispensing, but you start putting active control electronics in it, then you start combining electronics with, again, a mechanical system, you advance further. And to take it a step further, that all these islands that we talk about, and that was nice when I joined NCS, because at the time I was laser focused on chemistry. All of a sudden I said, oh, Chris was doing amazing things on the tunnel control aspect. And I just came with this chemistry. And then they have Pure Clean on filtration and stuff. And they say, how can we tie that all together? So we started to think about how can we connect all those islands into a central server product where we can really see all these aspects that's going on. Because if you look in the past too, with the PC revolution, everybody had a little computer at home, and in the beginning it's kind of a novelty. It's kind of like running a single car wash. But all of a sudden, if you have lots of those, they have to start talking to each other. You start gathering data. So it's the filtration system knows something that could be of importance to the car wash, etc. And that's kind of what we're doing. And that's kind of what's also happening with Industry 4.0, and we call it Car Wash 4.0, where we tie all these things together because you don't know what you don't know. All of a sudden you get data that we've learned that a couple of times. You start looking at data, says, my God, I had no idea that was happening.
Yeah, you learn surprises, things you didn't know, and you're like, wow, the data points to the problem, and if you don't have the data, you don't know what the problems are.
You got it. And that goes then basically for 4.0 to 5.0, which is basically we're at the birth of that is the artificial intelligence and big data, and all that stuff is coming together. But you have to start with the data. So we already have information from years that we haven't even looked at, but we have it stored because we know once the software tools are there, it will bring us to the new future. And so that's kind of a little bit the role that Chris and I play with is I'm trying to figure out how I get all that data together, also how to obtain the information out of all these legacy systems. So it's very exciting. It's a journey for years, and I can tell you I'm still not bored. Sometimes you meet people like, what else is there still to do in car wash? We've been messing around for 40 years in there. So you have no idea.
That's a good kind of a good segue into what's next. So if you have any questions for Chris or Juan, make sure you drop them in the chat and we'll get to you. There's a bunch of new stuff that you guys have been working on and kind of what led up their development that kind of goes with the NCS story. So Chris, you sort of talked about starting in the IBA, kind of grew into tunnels. You noticed the gap in the industry, especially with tunnel controllers. And now we kind of want to know the why and the how of Car Wash 4.0 and the smart controller. So what is the smart controller? How can you explain that to the audience, and how is it different from what's out there today?
Yeah, I think Jan started framing that up pretty well about connecting all the various systems, right? So if you look at what an IBA is, it's a robot, right? We don't think of it like a robot, but that's what it is. Right? It has a PLC as a logic sequence. It's reacting to the car. It knows its position. It moves around it. Things like that. If you look at a tunnel in its current state, it's really an automaton. If you think about it, it's timing. You hope all the timing is right too, right? So you have some sensors that give you feedback, and you hope the car is in the right position once it gets through the gate. But after that, it's fingers crossed, right? And you're seeing some innovation in the space where you can identify cars out of position in certain ways and whatnot. But the feedback loop of a system is just really not there, and that's really what we're looking towards on the smart tunnel controllers. All the data we talked about for all the diagnostics, not just a fault signal, just saying something's wrong, but what's wrong and where and why, right? But then as you build this data, as you connect everything, you have a platform that you can build upon, and you can start looking at a true feedback loop, much more like an IBA or much more like a robot, where the wash system knows if it's washing your car well, or it's changing its performance towards your car. And there's a lot to get to that spot. Just like Jan said, right? There's this evolution, right, where you bring these things online, you start collecting the data, you learn how to use the data, right? And then at that point is when you can change the performance of the system. So for us, we needed a foundation, and NCS did not have its own tunnel controller, and that's kind of where our journey started. Is we need to establish that footprint, and as we do so, though, a complete eye on the future. What do we need now? Where is the market going? What can we do with all of this, and how do we get ahead of it, right? So we're building for Car Wash 4.0, but we're also building to Jan's point to 5.0. So we're somewhere in the threes. I don't know, 2, 3.0. Who knows where we really are there, right? But it's and it's one thing when you have a smart controller that can connect or can utilize that data, understand what's going on with the vehicle, and change its performance. But then the 4.0 aspect really starts talking about how do we integrate even systems beyond that, right? So this first iteration is making the tunnel controller smarter so we can improve performance and collect data. All right. Then it's connecting it to all these other systems where we know when a motor is going to fail, and we can predict that. And that's a smart tunnel controller. But a 4.0 tunnel controller says that motor is in inventory in our DC nearest your car wash, and we can get a service ticket, drawn up and have a pick pulled for that motor to have it go out and be installed before it even goes down. That's 4.0. And that's the future we're building towards.
Yeah, that's incredible. Now, Jan, I kind of have a question for you. And from your perspective, what are the current challenges of MCCs and tunnel controllers now? Because we're talking about the future and what you guys are working on currently, but as far as the present landscape of car wash MCCs and controllers, what do you see as the current challenges that operators are facing on the day to day?
Well, it's more the disconnect. If you look at tunnel controllers that are currently on the market, they're very much still semi-binary system. I mean, you turn things on and off, and then when the VFDs came in, they start playing a little bit with the speed and torque limitation on things. So that's kind of where the industry kind of stalled. But and Chris can talk to it a little bit more. But if you look like some of the things that NCS developed for the fleet industry, and when you think, well, that's kind of a lower end of washing, but they have very unique challenges in that the car drives through it. You don't control the speed of that conveyor. So in effect, that type of control is much more sophisticated than typically in a tunnel. And the things we learn there by high-speed control feedback from the VFDs into the behavior, that opened up our eyes to what the next step is for tunnels, because you start bringing that in and bring it to the next level. So what you say, what are the problems? I mean, the problem is, like I explained earlier, it's a very conservative industry, car wash. I mean, I always joke around it because when I was running Kessel, you come up with an idea and later says, well, the market is not ready for it. Well, go back to the drawing board. You have that luxury. Well, there's a Canadian company that was called BlackBerry. They were very successful. They put one wrong phone on the market and they were gone. That's the beauty in this industry. I mean, I can curse at it. On the one hand, it's a blessing in disguise because it allows you to, you know what I mean, to incrementally develop to the point where you need to be. But at the same point, my big frustration in the past with tunnel controllers is that you typically target the end user. They're not the machine builders. So very early on, when I was selling that stuff, I went to the OEM directly and said, "Why are you doing that? You leave all the margin in the table." But I realized that's where I can innovate, not on the back end. But those people were very nervous to say, "Oh my God, well, if I do this fancy stuff, then I can only use your controller. We don't really want that." You see what I mean? So you get all these energies of where you say, "This is where I want to go," and you got these back currents coming at, and now being at home with NCS, then you can see, yeah, all these pieces of the puzzle fall together because now, you know what I mean, you've been listened to on where that needs to be. And Chris had already started on his own, all that fancy stuff. And that's why it's such a perfect fit, because finally you felt, oh, I came home to where I need to be. You know what I mean? Because I'm not a mechanical engineer, he is. So that makes it
Exactly.
such a beautiful partnership on that. So it's very exciting, you know, where the new tunnel controllers are going.
Yeah, that's exciting, man. That's there's so much that goes on behind the scenes I don't think any of us really have insight or understanding of. So when you Chris, I'm gonna tee this one up a little different, but when you think about the benefits that car wash operators can or will be able to see in the future through the smart tunnel controller, what does that look like when you kind of play that out? And really, either one can step in and answer this, but when you think about our day-to-day of washing cars and how that makes us easier, how that makes it easier, how that puts out a cleaner car, what's that look like?
Yeah, honestly, I'll probably start a little bit earlier in that because there's a lot of solutions that we're working towards on the system. I'll say from various levels, we're solving a people problem in a lot of ways, right? This industry's grown so fast that you struggle to find enough qualified installers. You struggle to find enough qualified service techs. You struggle to find
Exactly.
enough managers and operators that you can keep your site operating efficiently and everything's running well and it's taking care of it the way you want to, right? So that's a good way, but it's a big problem, right? So we thought about this quite a bit in our development of this platform. So again, kind of where I'm starting earlier here is how do you install this faster, right? How do you minimize the amount of wires in the back room? And then by minimizing the number of wires in the back room, you minimize the amount of service troubles that people have to go through to find the problem.
Yeah.
And then on top of it, adding technology that automatically detects these problems, right? So we have a network-based system where you're dropping in modules of equipment that makes it very simple to hook up. You're not running a bunch of multi-conductor. You're not terminating.
More plug and play per se. Less actual wiring and being a master electrician. You're just dropping it right in.
Right. So not only does that save you time of wiring and obviously specific skilled labor to pay for, but also the schedule of that specific skilled labor. So we're trying to make construction through commissioning faster and easier and cheaper, right? So it gets you on time, gets you ahead of your loans and gets you moving faster, right? So, all right. And then once it's operating, this network-based system is no longer a VFD fault signal. It is a network solution saying which fault, on what device, at what time, and at what value of over voltage or whatever it is, right? So, and then we can directly communicate to your phone, right? That comes to our tunnel controller, that comes to our Lens app. You get notified on the spot if something's wrong.
So creating more awareness, but also like your car wash managers being able to understand it on a screen versus having to look up the code or get on Talk Carwash and ask for help. They can just have it readily available of like, hey, this is what our problem is and this is how we're going to fix it.
You got it. Like, what is this random error code? If you open up the cabinet while it's on to read the error code, right? Which is just dangerous. We're working on safety and all of this as well. To your point, I don't know what that code means. I got to go solve it. And here's all the potential issues it could be. Our goal is to do exactly what you just said, is put it in someone's hand. They know what it is, and we can put a verbose description of what the problem is, right? We can add detail to it. So you have a much better idea. So lowering the amount of skill you need to diagnose what's wrong with your car wash and get moving faster towards getting it operating again, right?
Which is huge as the industry continues to evolve and going and getting talent from outside of the industry and bringing it in. You can shorten that elasticity and that time of learning by just not dumbing it down, but making it make more sense for everyday people that haven't been in the car wash industry their whole life.
You got it. And like, where are we with devices? Everyone knows how to use an iPhone. My children,
exactly.
very young ages can navigate a phone and get through it very easily,
Yeah.
right? And understand what's going on.
Yeah.
So it's in our nature anymore, and
Mhm.
we're used to this as a medium to get this
Mhm.
information. So it's an obvious adaptation there. I think the other aspect is of what we're doing with the controller from the solutions aspect is, there's uniqueness in every operator, right? And we want to be able to provide fairly advanced features for you to set up and run to wash the way you want. So we're building in some unique automation aspects to it. And this is starting to build a platform that lets us do this kind of feedback control where
Mhm.
the brush senses your car and knows how much force it's putting on it, right? And how
Wow.
it moves around your car, right? We're making this where it's not necessarily hard coded, but it's configurable even in a way too, so you can choose how this thing operates.
Yeah. Yeah.
Improving
Hear about a lot of new technology that currently isn't out there.
yeah. Well, and we did. Jan nailed it right with our fleet program is where we learned on that. His point with the adjusting to speeds. You have various drivers. We taught a car wash to feel a car, find it, and move with it. It adjusts to
Mm.
the vehicle speed and it maintains contact all the way through the wash, right? So why is that not something we're not using in tunnels? And that's where we're going, right? That's what this platform
Exactly.
will let us do. So
Exactly.
um,
So just a little PSA for our audience here. If you guys have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comments, and we can segue and answer any questions at any time. We'll also open up the floor at the end for a live Q&A, and answer any more questions that anyone else has. And one thing that has just been kind of on my mind as you've been talking, Chris, is I hear a lot about benefits here, but as far as like how can I save, time, energy, and effort in the short term and long term with this new controller? I hear a lot of efficiencies. We've talked about, VFDs and codes and being more smart with washing the car. But as far as time, effort, and energy, how do you think it would save us the most?
yeah, I mean, I think we did touch on some of those, right? Like obviously on install, speed to diagnostics. I think that there's going to be a very fast onboarding with the product too. We've
Mm,
used specialists in UI UX to help us develop the interface, right? So
mm,
training is always an issue, right? Having people know this. So we created a modern interface that's just like what you're used to on an iPad in terms of touch interface and interoperation. Presenting the right information right there on the screen where you need it. Designated service screens, right? So when you get to the site, there's a specific view that teaches you
mm.
everything about that's been going on with the site,
Wow.
the immediate past, and all the information about statistical runs on the motors and start cycle times and all that type of information that you kind of need to know to move quickly towards service, right? And there's a big emphasis on getting things fixed right away if something goes wrong. But again, leaning towards the future where at some point this data teaches us to say, we know what's going to go wrong before it happens.
Yeah, I could see where that'd be very beneficial. Jan,
Yeah, and that is key too with the subscriptions, right? If you start selling subscriptions and they come at your car wash and it's not washing, they're not going to be happy about that. So even with this thing, in the past that would have lesser, you know what I mean? Because then it can go somewhere else. But now that they expect that they can wash, so it becomes more and more important is the uptime. And to Chris says, the uptime is not saying when it breaks down, okay, this is what's wrong. It would be nice if you look at, again, data from an electrical motor, and you can say, hey, the average consumption is this. So something is wrong, probably mechanical or with the motor itself. So you can predict that before. And that's kind of where you want to be. And then you want to have that motor already being shipped from the warehouse, right? And you can schedule the technician, like as a preventive maintenance on a rainy day, that you start
Mm,
changing that gearbox and the motor combination. So this is kind of all part of that 4.0.
mm,
Some other aspect we demonstrated at the trade show is, for instance, when you have like chemical level sensors and you say, hey, it goes low. That right
mhm,
away we'll dispatch a QR code that you can go to an on-site cabinet, you scan it, and off goes the door opens with the right product. So that becomes
mm.
like a virtual warehouse of the main company. You see? So that's how you start solving all sorts of problems in supply chain, and you know what I mean? That you don't run out on a Friday afternoon. Oh, now I have no chemistry. So that's all part of that thinking of supply of spare parts and the raw materials to make sure, again, Chris and I view it as a small factory, a car wash
It
shop.
is. I call it
You
a
start
clean car
applying.
factory. That's what I call it.
That's it, exactly. And then you apply the best practices that you see in Industry 4.0 into Car Wash 4.0. That's kind of
Yeah.
what we're
So,
trying to
so
do.
you guys are really just trying to, take the operator from reactive to being proactive and being able to catch things on the front side and really tailor in the data and the connectiveness into the operations versus all of these segmented systems that aren't really communicating, and it's just one thing after another that you have to touch to make sure that it's, properly functioning.
Correct. And
Absolutely.
also to take the tribal knowledge out of it, right? Like, if you go back, Blake, even 10 years ago, before the MSO and private equity started buying a lot of this stuff up, these were like maybe one or two site owners. Typically, like my
Hmm.
uncle, they were mechanically inclined. So in the morning, they walk through to the equipment room and they listen. And they know already by
Hmm.
the time they start the day and
Their
have their first
buzzes and
coffee.
their hums, the orchestra is sounding
Yeah,
appropriate versus a squeal over here or something, that needs
yeah.
attention. You're like, oh, that doesn't sound right.
So now you own 100 sites. You
Yeah.
understand? That's a whole different, because now, again, we see a lot of evolution on the point of sale about counting the money, because that's important. Private equity understands that too. But all of a sudden, it's you need that same thing in the factory. So it's almost like when you look at this thing, it's like, oh my God, you're running a factory with really no factory best practices. That's what you're doing. And that's
Hmm.
scary for big
Well
money.
said.
You have no
Yeah.
clue.
Y'all, and kind of own that. So I like what Blake said about I've been doing this for a long time now, and I can walk into a car wash and kind of see. I can hear if there's something off. I can walk to the vacuum lot and tell you if there's a nozzle not right. But with the stuff that you guys are talking about with kind of these motor control centers and tunnel controllers, so there's a lot of people building washes. There's a lot of people rehabbing washes. When you think through the prep that they need to do to like get their wash ready for what's coming for these connected solutions, is there any special recommendations on space, build out, the way the wash needs to be done inside the motor control center room, any special conduits, chases, anything that need to be ran for that? Is there anything specific that you guys can think of that, people need to kind of prep for the future, or will they be able to use exactly what they already have and just kind of upgrade it, rewire it?
Yeah, I don't think there's anything real special, much different here. In fact, I think we're kind of reducing some of the needs for amount of wire in a chase and cable tray and things like that. I mean, you're still going to need all that, but we are looking at the performance of the blowers and the systems to control that. So in some ways, we're adding a little space to add infrastructure behind that, but there's nothing dramatically different in terms of how you structure this. I think it's more about simplicity of wiring is probably the biggest difference you're going to see in terms of a site layout.
Okay. Yeah.
But it does lend toward less low voltage contracting too, which I think is
Great.
a big piece here.
Jan, I would love to hear your kind of side on that too. And then, something that we learned at my Camel locations, especially since like 2022 and on, is we basically ran for 6 years with the same internet that we had installed. I think it was a 200 MG service. Never really upgraded, never touched it because it worked. As we added apps and team member connectivity, and then a cloud camera system, our point of sale was doing recharges because we started getting massive amount of members at sites. We started crashing a lot, and we eventually, after we installed a camera system, things just wasn't working like they were, and we had it diagnosed and figured out that we kind of had to switch to a mesh network and assign things the bandwidth that it needed. Do you guys see that? I know from a lot of my friends that I've talked to in the industry, they've all recently, in like the last year, had to do some pretty serious IT repairs and network upgrades. Do you guys see that being a big thing everybody's really gonna have to look into?
Yeah, that's a great question. When I built my tunnel controller, they had Ethernet-based I/O, right? And the first thing you learn is you want to keep it as a complete separate network. Because to your point, in the early days, you have that they hook up a camera system on the same network. Next thing is, you know what I mean? Your tunnel controller starts to do weird things.
Mhm.
And that's a simple example, but that migrates further to PCI compliance of what you can do and cannot do. And then you start getting firewalls. At the other time, we were building out cloud-based systems, and we need also connectivity. And the IT people would completely freak out when you start doing things like that. Like, you got Wi-Fi, now they're going to come on our network, and then they're going to take this planet out of orbit. And that's one part. But then also, like with the AccuPump, you have these IoT devices. You would find out that 90% of your work of installation was trying to get on their network. Oh, what's the password? Oh, I don't know. I have to ask. Oh, is it a capital? Oh, is it a space? That also drove you nuts, right? And then when it's up and running, 3 weeks later, all of a sudden, traffic doesn't come through. Oh, yeah, we put this something in the firewall. Anyway, long story short, it's all these problems. So what we decided to do, we'll just take our lens up. So what we're doing, we're putting our own internet node into the site, right? Where we bring in the connectivity based on the bandwidth that we need, with the requirements that we need, with the security that we need, and that talks to the boxes the way we want to talk to the boxes. So all that stuff goes away because the cost of connectivity is going down and down and down. Where before they say, well, I'm not going to pay $100 for another internet, connection. That's no longer the case, right? Because both speed and bandwidth goes down and down and down. So we can afford now to put something there and say that's, so now it goes to the cloud. So now when we talk about data acquisition, you go to the cloud and get it from there. Or if you want to bring it to the next level, we go cloud to cloud transaction. So if you say, here's corporate and this is our finance, and we want to see how many car wash we did and what the chemical costs are. Okay, well, we'll just make a hook into the server and here is the data. So that's how we're transitioning, you know what I mean? To create our own ecosystem, because we don't want to
Beautiful.
on your camera system and all your infrastructure, because we learned the hard way with that's not the way to do it, So.
Yeah, we call that felon Ford.
Instead of washing Ford.
Yeah.
Hey, well, guys,
and that's the
we
same thing. Sorry, yeah, that's the same
have a
thing.
question.
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Jan. You can finish, and then I'll ask the question from the chat.
Yeah, the same thing is kind of too when you talk about like cloud-based services. You're not going to start putting your own PCs and infrastructure and stuff in the way. You leave it up to, you know what I mean, to the big three in the industry that take care of it. Then you worry about network security and backups and all that stuff is taking scalability, right? So all of a sudden you got a huge order and it's not like, oh my God, I have to rethink, all the hardware. That's all part of that vision, right? Where you want to grow. It's very exciting because it's like, I would say it's like a Lego system as a kid, but nowadays you get blocks that are much nicer and much more fun and
a little bit more customizable too.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we have a question from Matt DeWolf in the chat. So he's asking about the controller. He says, does the modular approach also eliminate the single point of failure? If a modular is down, presumably that doesn't take the whole controller down. Because I know some other controllers on the market, if you have a logic card go down or this card go down, then the whole thing doesn't work and you're not washing cars. So have you guys kind of thought ahead and kind of preparing the operator for success if and when something does fail? Because at the end of the day, it is electronics. There's a lot of humidity, there's a lot of water, the cabinet gets left open. So it's like it can run perfect, but things do depreciate, things do break and go wrong. So how have you guys thought about that to be more proactive?
Yeah, we've thought a lot about that actually. So a couple layers, but specific to this question, the modular approach is networked in such a way that it's redundant. So we have several small loops of network through the back room, and they're kind of organized by equipment type, sort of, to kind of keep it simple. But the idea is that there's a full loop connection on the network, a circular connection. And if you break the circle at any one spot, it can go the other direction and continue to work. And if you have multiple hops, well, let me back up. So when you break a connection, it actually tells you where the break is. So everything's still working and it tells you where your point of failure is. So you have an opportunity to go fix it before anything goes down. That's just the network system. That's the modular network system. Now there's potential where if you had multiple hops and you have two breaks, something could be on an island. But the whole idea of this redundancy and the alert is that you can go and fix it before something actually goes more dramatic there. And then, at the point of connection, for instance, a valve, right? That's connecting to an IO. Now you still have an opportunity for failure there. There's no redundant setup for an air valve unless you're getting really crazy about your design. But the idea though is that our outputs that control the components, if they're not a network device, if they are discrete logic or even analog, they are advanced outputs with diagnostics built in. And so we can immediately determine when things are going wrong. So particularly if you think about air valves and water valves, you can often be blind to them not working at all, right? It's a visual that something is going wrong that you have to see to learn about, right? It's feedback from a person to learn that there's a failure there typically, right? And our setup, we have the ability to understand if you're out of voltage, open loop, valve's not firing, and we will alert you on your phone for that as well. So it's quick, again, all back to speed of knowledge of the status of your system and getting it back online.
Got it. Yeah, that you guys, I'm probably going to speak to the whole room here, but I remember busy days when you're running 60, 70 cars an hour back in the day, to where the inner switch or the pulse switch would go out, and it was chaos. And then at the time, we the point of sale company, and they came out with simulated inner and simulated pulse. And once we got that dialed in and we actually used it, I was like, man, talk about saving the day, because we'd be in the back flicking tunnel controller switches off and on trying to run cars versus, them just putting average length of a car to 16, 18 foot and you just going. So those kind of things are big day savers.
Yeah.
All right, cool. That was one of the questions that we had. So now down to kind of the tech and the car washing part. So outside of MCCs and tunnel controllers, what are some of the kind of other examples of future tech and car washing? Chris, you had kind of talked about, robotics and car washing, bringing IBA techs to the tunnel, robots versus automatons. I may be saying that wrong, improving performance with Fleet X. What else is coming?
Yeah, well, I think our big focus is on connected solutions. So I would say that's kind of one of our sprints, but it's a long haul as well, right? So just working through the back room, making sure all of our equipment is online and connected, and we're not just down to discrete wires and fault signals, right? We are truly integrated with all those products, and you guys have the data points and all the information you need about your system live and as things change, right? So we've made huge strides in the backroom already. The tunnel system, the tunnel controller itself is our foray into the actual tunnel, right? To get that equipment connected as well. So I think that's a big piece of it. There's, like we said, there's a lot more advancement to come on the tunnel controller. It's a foundational product for us, and we have a million different dreams of what this thing will let us do. And we obviously shared some of them with you, but it expands a lot further and farther into energy savings is a big component. We want you to be very tuned in with what you're using for water and power and chemistry. We have some of that sorted out. And as this product is refined, it will be more integrated and comprehensive and single point of data, if you will. This will let you really adjust what your wash packages are like, what they have, how they're operating, how much they're costing you. You'll be much more in tune with that. I guess that's a couple. Jan, I'll give you a second. I don't know if you have anything you want to add there.
Yeah, Jan kind of had put in there about, improving operational efficiencies with data and then kind of using tech to minimize impact of lower wash counts. But cover whatever you guys would like. I'm interested.
Yeah, a couple of years ago, I had a friend in the island of Curacao, and he decided to put a car wash there. And sometimes you do these cases that you say, oh, you're so lucky you can go there. But it had very unique challenges in that, you know what I mean? The water and the electricity prices were 10 times kind of what they are here. So then you start looking at the economics of that, and then you start looking at your washing machine, right? And you say, if you have a dirty load or a light load, you have a button that you press on your washing machine. And yet on a tunnel, it's not there. You throw in every car like it's that. So you start looking at where this is going to is the variability, trying to understand, okay, what does this thing need? Because in his case, he had like a whole bunch of car rental places, and a lot of these guys would rent the car for the day, and on the island, you know what I mean? There is no really rain. So those cars come pretty much clean back, yet they had to go through. So they started, when we designed that stuff, you press a button and then you say, okay, well, this thing is kind of a rental car, so no need, you know what I mean? Go bring the pressures down on the high pressure pump. There's no need for it. Bring the chemistry down. So you start to kind of playing with that, like to be more environmental conscious. So also, if you look at Industry 5.0, it's all about environment and being, you know what I mean, renewable energy.
Yeah.
So it's kind of putting
Sustainable.
the solar
Yeah.
on the roof, right?
Yeah.
So that's all. So this is all where everything is going to. It's not just like, hey, let's clean it, but let's be smarter on how we're going to clean it. I mean, we do it too with the tire shine. We know, okay, this is a member, so there's a good chance that the tires are already like semi-saturated, like a tire is like a sponge, right? So if I know it's a member, so I can put a little bit less chemistry on the brush. He still gets the same saturation, so we're not making anything. But I know whatever I throw on the brush, you know what I mean, that doesn't go into the tire stays on the brush. So you can make a mathematical consideration to say, okay, yeah, this is how we're going to be. We're going to get smarter. We're going to get more knowledge about the car, and through that, you know what I mean, we're going to save the environment and also operating costs. So that's kind of very much also the same thing too with chemistry. We're trying to go to hyper concentrate. You don't want to start trucking water, right? You want to start getting smarter around those things too.
Yeah, I know that a lot of people, particularly, have went to some sort of hyper concentrates or some system like that in their back rooms, not only for not trucking water, but for space. The car washes aren't really getting bigger these days, property
Yeah.
getting tight.
Yeah.
Then they sort
And
of
that gives new challenges, and you need new technology to do that, right? So this is kind of where all these things kind of come together. So once you figure that out, then you can do that. So it's kind of an,
I think a challenge that you guys have to work through is, kind of similar with the AccuDose, changing chemistry on the fly works, except the prime. It's already primed in the line from what you got the next car. So you make
you
it
got
some
it.
stronger chemical on the
Yeah.
front, weaker on the back. And then if you got a really dirty car that comes in next, you're gonna have to get that weaker chemical out of the line for you to prime the strong chemical in there.
Yeah. And you see that too. You see in the case that you gave, like with a direct dosing system like the AccuShine, that means the minute the pump goes faster, the delivery is instantly. So that's why you can do that. But to your point, if I have a triple foamer, I cannot do that because that thing is mixed in the back room, right? So there's a time delay till it gets on the car. So now you have to start thinking, okay, we have to rethink that. We have to probably, if we want that, then you have to put the injection point right at the arch, right? So again, the mechanical system changes. But that's the beauty. If you start working with controls and mechanical at the same time, then you can come up with different solutions that in the past you say, well, this is how it's done. And yeah, but things evolve. And you have to start thinking about what does that look like, right? And where you're going to put the control points. And like the more you put in the bay, the better it is. There's less wiring, but the more, you know what I mean? Susceptible you are to stuff. But then you start looking at that evolution goes fast too of people that make basically distributed I/O that is completely watertight, right? So you can throw that stuff in the back room and you can put, you know what I mean, a gun on it and it survives. So you start looking at all the economic balance between what's available, and that's a whole story in itself that I can talk about hours about. Is that like you try to just stay ahead of what the industry is doing because the industry, like Siemens and Hitachi and those big boys, they want to sell 10,000s of units. The multiple is much higher than what Tesla is doing and what we're doing. So we rely on what they bring out. But those guys are notorious to be always like 10 years behind. Look at the PLC slowly start to get Ethernet ports out. We did that 20 years ago or 15 years ago. And that's what's happening now too. That's the hard time. We have to do all that pioneering work because it's just not available yet. When we started with IoT, we had to write all our own device drivers to talk to the server and go back. Nowadays, you go to Amazon, you have a library suite, you know what I mean, of functions to do that. So this is the problem. You don't want to engineer yourself into bankruptcy, but you just want to keep on innovating at the same time and take, these risks. And that's the challenge. You're always sitting just ahead of that, you know what I mean, of the storm of what's coming, you know what I mean, into
absolutely.
A lot of big
Yeah.
Go ahead, Blake.
Yeah, go ahead. Just everyone in our audience, we have about 10 minutes left here. We're going to kind of open it up for a live Q&A. If you are on Zoom, you can actually join the conversation. So if you raise your hand, we can bring you in and you can ask your question live. Now, if you're on one of the other platforms, you can just drop it in the comments and we're monitoring those and we're open up the floor for any questions for Jan and Chris here, or Tyler and myself. And we're excited to kind of just jump into some general talk car wash questions. The first question I'd like to ask is, where do you guys see car washing in 10 years? You guys are talking about the future now. Where do you see that we're going to go, 10 years from now? Is it just more connectedness, more intelligent washing, or is there going to be some big advancements in the space?
I think is you really have to start thinking about who is your customer, right?
Mm.
And if you go back in the 60s and 70s with muscle cars, there was like a really love bond between the owner and the vehicle. And where we're going now, if I'm not sure if you saw that presentation of Tesla, that they have these self-driving things. There's no steering wheel anymore,
Yeah,
right?
Robovan and the Robo Taxi. There's no steering wheel. There's just a big screen. You get in and you get taken to
That's
your
it.
destination.
So, but think about it. What does that? But the interesting thing is, what does it do to ownership? I mean, you like your car is your pride and you keep it clean. But now everybody has the potential of using that. That
Mhm.
starts changing the whole way of looking at it. Like so, if
It's
you talk about
more utilitarian. It's more of a tool and a function versus an item of possession.
right, so and that
Yeah.
thing will go autonomous to get its electricity, right? So then it
Yeah.
makes sense that there's going to be more kind of like the fleet X systems that we're developing, like more like smaller units to go there. So the car goes there, gets electricity, gets cleaned.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? So you
Yeah.
see what I mean? So this is like where it's going. It's part of everything connected, everything done,
Yeah.
and also you have to start thinking like, will that structure that is today in place, and short term there's no threat, but if you start talking 10, 15 years ago, there could be a complete shift into, you know what I mean, how people need to have that car clean and how they do it. And I think also, um, again, Tesla was playing with that. It's also the interior, because right now we've concentrated on the outside of the vehicle. The inside is still very much a manual operation,
Yeah,
right?
I don't know
So
if you saw they in one of the videos they had an automated vacuumer that was going through and vacuuming the seats and the floorboards based on how the actual unit was designed. They took away the obstructions and just made it simple for them to go through and automatically clean with a robotic arm. So I thought that was
bingo.
quite intriguing. Yeah.
That's exactly what it is. And for that, you need vision, you need artificial intelligence, right? Because it's like, remember we started off using gravity and feel what a car is? It's super primitive. And this is where all is going.
Hmm.
It's going to be more touchy-feely and going there. So how I see it 15 years from now, we have a different clientele, we have different needs. I wouldn't be surprised if we're going to see more and more, you know what I mean? Like these kind of fleet X systems have machines specifically gained to the self-driving stuff. And yeah, it's not in my, you know what I mean? Probably, hopefully, well, my lifetime, but not my working time. But it's fun to think about what, you know what I mean? It's fun to think about where all this
Oh
is
yeah.
going.
There's
So
endless possibilities, really.
Chris,
it's,
go
yeah.
ahead. Sorry.
No, absolutely. It's exciting.
Yeah.
That's what I can tell you. It's like
Yeah.
it's every year, and this is another thing. I'm not sure if you ever studied history when you talk about agriculture. You know what I mean? Like you look at the big movements, and it's like 12,000 years, and then industrial revolution is like 100 years, and then the computers is 25 years. The question is, you ask yourself, if you were out of this earth and you come back, how many years do you have to be away that you come back and say, what happened here? I don't
Mm.
recognize hardly anything. And those things are getting shorter and shorter and shorter. And they say with artificial intelligence, we're talking about probably 10 years to make that same transition that you saw with internet in 20 years and that you
Mm.
saw with the computers in like 40 years when Alan Turing started after World War II with that stuff. And then the steam machine 100. So this is kind of very exciting. It's like these are like accelerating things, and
Yeah, the
yeah,
vertical
it's
vertical is turned all the
fascinating.
way up.
Sorry?
Yeah.
Chris,
the
I know
vertical.
Jan covered a lot right there, but Chris, we had like one more question we wanted to ask you guys, but do you have any quick perspective on kind of where you see things in 10 years?
Yeah, so I'm thinking about from our current product standpoint, I see our smart tunnel controller out there doing all the things we envisioned, which is that 4.0 concept, right? Where when you pull into the wash, it knows your type of vehicle. It feels its way around. It ensures it's clean. It finds the dirty spots. It picks those up and concentrates on those, right? You have total autonomy in the system. I'm sure there's applications in AI. We're planning on the machine learning aspects of predictive maintenance, but just being able to totally understand what your car's needs are from a wash experience and producing a clean, shiny, dry car perfectly as you want every single time.
Cool. Thank you for that. Real quick, I guess, let's say 30 seconds or less. When you think about NCS and your current role, where do you find the most fulfillment?
Do we lose your audio, Newman?
Jan, you might have muted yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, no, for me is all that experience that you've gained over the years to see it all come together, and it's kind of like what I said earlier, like connecting all the islands together. That gives me a huge amount of fulfillment to see all these parts of the puzzle, you know what I mean, come in place. It's almost like when you build a 2,000 pieces puzzle, and the excitement comes near the end, right? When the last parts fall in place, and I feel in the journey, my career, where that started, like I said earlier on, as washing at my uncle, to where I am today, is you can see it all kind of nicely come together into, you know what I mean? The canvas I was given in my life has generated a beautiful picture by being just at the right time, at the right place. It's just, I don't know what it was. Like you know what I mean? All of a sudden I end up in NCS, and that changed my whole life. And that was not planned. It's just that here I am in life, and I said, wow, I cannot be at a better place. It's very exciting.
In our business,
Beautiful.
we call that everything happens for a reason. So,
Yeah.
Chris, what about you?
Yeah, I don't know if I can articulate it as well as Jan did, but similarly, my background, this industrial equipment, this experiential aspects of design, the web development, the automation, all of these pieces of my past folded perfectly together to where I am and what I'm doing in my role now. And while I don't have the years of car wash experience, it all comes together in a similar way for me. And just generally, I'm a creative. I like to design and build. I like to create technology. I like to see how it impacts people's lives and improves it. And I have all of that here, and we get to do it every day, which is just a blast. And I got a fantastic group of people to work with, which makes it even better, including Jan here.
Yeah, it's the people that make it special, not what we
really
do,
is.
it's who we
It's a
do
big
it with. Yeah.
Cool.
Well, big thank you to Chris and Jan for joining us here on our first episode of the Wash Forward Show. Tune in to our next episode on November 29th. And don't forget to sign up for the NCS newsletter to get updates from the NCS team, controller, and Car Wash 4.0. We'll drop that link in the chat for you guys to join that newsletter, and we're looking forward to the next episode. Thank you for everyone for tuning in. Thank you, Jan. Thank you, Chris. And thank you, Tyler.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah.
Appreciate
Thank you,
everybody
guys.
joining. Have a great day.
Hope everyone has a great day.
Thank you. Okay. Bye.
Bye-bye.